the apparent failure, perhaps, of the rationalist atheist types to develop an active ethos that has sufficient beauty and motivational power to serve as a credible replacement for the religious rituals. So there must be a reason why that failure has occurred, right? So,
yeah,
so
well,
do you have any sense of what the reason might be?
I can give you a short list of reasons. One is that traditionally the impulse to do that in a religious context has been fatal, right? So to declare your apostasy has been the almost as reliable a way of committing suicide as jumping off a building in most cultures and most societies for the longest time, and still is in many places, as you know, in the Muslim world. So there's been a barrier to entry to thinking creatively about alternatives to religion. And so much of atheism and secularism is just a pitched battle against the eroding power of religion. I mean, when religion really has its power, right? We know what it's like. I mean, again, I think we spoke about this at one point. The moment that it makes this most salient is, Galileo being shown the instruments of torture by men who wouldn't look through his telescope, right? I mean, that was the point of contact between untrammeled human rationality and the womb that bore it, right? The religious awe at the beauty of the heavens, right? So the moment a person like Galileo stepped a little too far, and to connect this to astrology again, Galileo was a court astrologer, right? I mean, so there was a point of contact between astronomy and astrology at that point. So we're still under the shadow of that kind of dogmatism and oppression in much of the world. I mean, for the longest time, it's still in the United States, you cannot run for the presidency without pretending to believe in God. It's amazing. It's an amazing fact, right? When will that change? Someday it will, but we have just had almost no time to experiment in this space and innovate in this space.
Well, there's been some time. There have been some decades. And I suppose the thing that unites Jordan and me on this is if we face some of the problems, some of the enemies, you might even say, that you identify as well, and the question is whether you should face them in the midst of an experiment that may or may not work, i.e. a leap into pure rationality, or whether you might decide it's worth, among other things, taking some of the versions of things that you've had that have been of worth in your past and using them where they're useful.
But what are you picturing there? Because there really is no leap. There's no global leap to pure rationality. There's this incremental erosion of religious answers to terrestrial questions. So there's again, the moment you have a science of neurology, you begin to look at epilepsy not as demonic possession, but as a neurological problem. Before there's a science of neurology, you don't know what the hell's happening, right? So into that space...
Something obviously drove Douglas, I would say, in some sense, surprisingly, to make the assumption that one of the things that we need to do to defend whatever it is that we have of value in the West, assuming that we have anything of value, was something like the reincorporation of this religious substructure. So it's not something that I would have expected you to conclude.
Yeah, but what
so
are you
why
picturing?
did you conclude it?
Well, partly for the reason I just suggested, that the leap into pure rationality, there's no evidence yet that it's going to work, or it's going to be enough, or enough people are going to be able to partake in it.
But give me the precise place where you're worried that it's going to fail, and what are you imagining doing?
Well, you think it's failing now.
Yeah, let me give you one example.
Yeah.
And we may be in the midst of the discovery that the only thing worse than religion is its absence.
And where are we discovering that?
Look at the religions that people are making up as we speak. I mean, every day there's a new dogma, and you and I and Jordan have repeatedly tripped over those dogmas. Some usually survived, it has to be said, but they're stampeding to create new religion all the time at the moment. Every new heresy that's invented. and they're not as well thought through as past heresies. They don't always have the bloody repercussions yet, but you can easily foresee a situation in which they do.
Right,
I mean, a new religion is being created as we speak by a new generation of people who think they are non-ideological, who think they're very rational, who think they're past myth, who think they're past story, who think they're better than any of their ancestors and have never bothered to even study their ancestors.
Right. So, but can't you say that dogmatism is the problem? The generic problem here is dogmatism, a firm belief in the absence of good argument and good evidence.
And absolutely, we can agree that dogmatism of any kind has that danger, or will always have that danger. But the void also has a danger. The void that you can create if you throw out all the stories that helped get you to where you are also has this danger, because people come up with these new stories. And every day's news now is about this. Our politics is now basically about this. I mean, well, actually...
Yeah, and what's flown in to fill the gap seems to be something like a new tribalism.
Absolutely.
Which is exactly what you'd expect in some sense, right? If you demolish the superordinate system, religion divides people, no doubt, but it also unites people.
Yes.
And so one of the things that arguably unites people above their mere tribalism is their union in an abstract religious superstructure. Yeah. And then if you demolish that, well then one of the things that does seem to happen is the emergence of a reflexive tribalism, because people need a group identity of sorts. And the easiest thing to do seems to be to revert to ethnicity and race and gender and sex, etc., etc. And then we do end up, and have ended up, in this situation that Douglas outlines. And one of the things I think that distinguishes us temperamentally, possibly, maybe because you're a little more on the liberal side and I'm a little more on the conservative side, even temperamentally speaking, is that your fundamental terror is that of fundamentalism, although you also state in the moral landscape that you understand the perils of nihilism. And I would say my fundamental terror is that of nihilism, even though I'm sensitive to the catastrophes of fundamentalism. But I don't think you do address the problem of the void sufficiently, because I don't think that you have anything to offer except, and I'm not trying to minimize your offering. You make a case that people should work to alleviate suffering and that we should live in truth, but Jesus, Sam, you can summarize that in 2 sentences. It doesn't have the potency of the fictional, literary, artistic substructure that seems necessary to make that into something that's a compelling story.
Well, so this is where we might disagree. This could be a fundamental disagreement, because I don't see the problem of nihilism the way you do, or the way it's advertised. Like once you rip out the false certainties and the bad evidence and the bad arguments and the mere dogmas imposed on us by prior generations, that hole never closes safely with anything else. You have to put something in its place that's shaped just like that, some other false certainty or some other story. And I simply don't think that's the case. I think there's so many things we outgrow, both individually, in our own childhoods, and culturally, that where there is no void left. There's no Santa Claus-shaped void that we have to fill with the exact same thing.
But people certainly experience that.
Some people,
void.
yeah, people. I'm not discounting the fact that it is hard to be happy in this world. I mean, we are living in a world that seems perfectly designed to frustrate our efforts to find permanent happiness.
So you asked me, you put me on the spot a while back.
But let me just add my answer to this. I just think that there's the recipe for a good life, or at least a minimal recipe for a good life. It's not that this is all that's entailed, but this is certainly necessary, if not sufficient, is to live a life that is increasingly motivated by love and guided by reason. Right? You can't go very far wrong if you are motivated by love and guided by reason. Right? And the problem is that.
Well, the first thing I would say about that is, to me, that's a recapitulation of the Judeo-Christian ethic, which is that you
Well,
should be guided by love and use logos to serve that.
Except
And
you
I
got
don't think
to
that's
read the
accidental.
fine print on reason.
No,
Yeah,
well, I didn't say reason. I said logos, because that's that's something that's deeper than reason.
There's the Jesus smuggling I
Yes,
was worried about.
exactly. Well, yes, definitely.
I said it would happen.
Okay, so